Our next panel, I think, is very fitting because safety is the foundation of what we do every day, every flight. And so it's appropriate to start our conference with safety and the fireside chat with NTSB Chair Hamidi. And we will close our conference focusing on safety with our wonderful panel. And when you search for safety and leadership, you may see the photo of our next moderator, Dr. Hassan Shahidi, there. As CEO of Flight Safety Foundation, he has just done incredible work for safety. I know he was introduced yesterday, but he has been leading in aviation safety for over 35 years. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Shahidi and his esteemed panel to the stage.
Thank you. Thank you, Faye, and good morning. And it's been a great couple of days, and congratulations to RAA for putting on a very successful summit again this year. Well done. This panel is going to be a conversation. We have a great panelists here that I will introduce in a minute about safety and safety culture and the way forward. Let me just introduce the panel. George Novak, President and CEO, National Air Carrier Association. Andrew Bonnet, Chief Operating Officer, Cape Air. Tim Pyle, Executive Director, Office of Accident Investigation and Prevention, FAA. Nabuyu Ranch, Senior Vice President, Safety and Regulatory Affairs with RAA. I'd like to start us with a conversation about the safety record that we have had in this industry for the past 15, 20 years, which has been amazing, and it really goes to the professionals that work every day to make our system safe as it is. And I think it's important to recognize safety leadership, and we've been talking about safety leadership over the past couple of days, and leadership in general. What I'd like to maybe start the conversation is with what else can we do as an industry to continue to improve safety moving forward. So we'll do some give and take on this. I think we'll share some stories about what each of the organizations are doing. So George, maybe you can start us off with some thoughts on that.
Sure, thank you, Hassan. So I think one of the key things we can do as an industry is continue the cooperation, oddly, with the FAA, right? So oddly, yeah, no. It's one of the things we have to do is we have to learn that this development of a safety culture, which I think Kim will probably talk a little bit more about, is critical, and that is actually involves an interaction among all parties. And I think, and I'll make these comments later, but I think if the general public knew what we do as an industry and working with labor, with our regulators, and we cooperate, I think they would be absolutely amazed, because the stories they see are sometimes, these sensationalist stories about something that happened. But actually, this culture that we've developed, this safety culture among the airlines, with the regulators, and with industry and labor is phenomenal. And I think that's one of the things we have to continue to do, foster those relationships, foster that culture.
Add to that, because I think it's the nail on the head. It's culture that will enable effectiveness of all the safety actions. You can do one thing as a leader. I ask you to say thank you when somebody brings you bad news. Please create this space to learn about what's going wrong in the system and respond with gratitude instead of criticism. Because when we do that, we allow for continuous learning and improvement of a very complex socio-technical system that we're trying to manage in a very high-risk environment. But leadership, you set the tone. Are you open-minded? Are you listening to all voices? And do you say thank you when you've been given news you don't expect to hear or don't want to hear?
So we'll definitely circle back on both collaboration and cooperation and on safety information sharing, which is so important in our system. Andrew, let's hear from you.
Sure. With regard to culture, it's so important that we actually live what we preach on having a just culture. When we do get that feedback that something's wrong, it's so important that we handle it appropriately, confidentially, when appropriate, and then our staff has to see us actually act on that. There's nothing more frustrating for staff when they use the process that they're given to report something, particularly around a safety item, and it doesn't get fixed. This year, I actually had the privilege of being qualified as a Cape Air First Officer. And as I started flying the system after being with the company for 17 years in a management role, I went into one of our break rooms. And in that break room, we have a coffee maker. And that coffee maker had been out of service for a long time, weeks, maybe even months. I didn't know about it. And our staff had actually put an MEL tag on it. Because they felt that it became a joke internally, right? They felt that they were raising their hand saying, hey, this is broken, this is broken, this is broken, won't you fix it? And we finally noticed it when it had an MEL tag on it. So that's the kind of internal sensitivity we need to have when people are raising their hands that something's wrong. We need to then act on it. And I will tell you that very quickly, we put in a brand new coffee maker in that break room.
I echo everyone else. I just want to put it in a different perspectives. When we talk about the safety culture, we talk about it really candidly, but it's not easy to create safety culture. And I was thinking about FAA's compliance philosophy. Back in 2015, I believe, former FAA administrator issued a compliance philosophy. And airlines' senior leadership and FAA's leadership had been talking about this kind of a concept for a long time. But when he actually signed it, that was almost revolutionary. And fast forward 10 years later, I think we are still trying to realize what the full intention of what compliance philosophy is. And so it's not easy to, we have ups and downs and setbacks, but I think we are making progress. And another thing it's not easy to do is measure safety culture and just culture or reporting culture. You can say, well, our reporting culture is good because the number of ASAP report is good. But I can think of one example. When something happens, you hear people say, oh, I found that on news media. But if you have a good safety culture, the senior leadership should be already informed by own employees before the news hit the media. But I wanted to go a little bit more broader, which is human, people. I think focusing on people is very important. And the more we have new technologies or advanced technologies, I think the more critical human factors become. Because not only how interact with new technologies, but Hassan, yesterday on the training panel, you mentioned about new generation of people. So we are also changing and understanding of how new generation of us interact with technologies, also learning technologies or even their attitude. And another thing, opening session, Chair Harmony mentioned about mental health. So I think focusing on people is core, should be core of everything we do, and that includes improving safety.
Thank you, Namboyo. Great points, especially about the next generation as we're talking about safety culture and the current generation that we've been in this business for a long, long time. How do we impart the knowledge and how we do it to the next generation? And that is going to be so important moving forward, given what we're seeing in terms of the turnover and the demand over the next 5-10 years. You mentioned information and safety information. We've been talking about it. Maybe we can just focus on that a little bit, because we in this industry have really been fortunate to have had the mechanisms in place for the past 20, 30 years with ASAP and FOCA and SIS. And that has been so important and crucial to having the information, the safety information, to be able to identify risks and then put in the mitigations. If we didn't have that information, we would not know where to look. So that has been really important for our industry. And moving forward, what else can we do in that area? What are we doing in different parts of the segments of industry? So Kim, maybe you can talk to us about what, maybe within the FAA, what you all are doing on this front.
Absolutely. Because there's so much value in sharing vulnerabilities with each other so that we can fix them. If we don't know what's broken, we can't fix it, right? And we don't want to be surprised in this business. So by sharing vulnerabilities at a systemic level, we're able to find and fix problems before an incident or accident occurs. That's the ideal, right? That being said, we're having to update some of our orders to protect data, because as you all know, data is currency now. Everything is out there, everything is, I mean, it's valuable, and people know it, and they want it now. They want it in real time. And so we're kind of doing a counterculture push by trying to protect some of these data sets so that we can do the learning and the engineering around what we're finding to fix something. And so we're updating our orders to cover broader data sets, including SMS data. And we're in the process of doing that. We may need to go into rulemaking, but in the meantime, we're working on an order to expand data protections. This is critical. If we don't do this, we will not find these problems before they show up on the news. And I don't think any of us like it to be surprised in that manner. What else? I mean, I think we also have to leverage every single capability at our disposal, including using machines to do what machines do best, calculate, collate, aggregate intelligence, and then have humans do the creative solutioning and the problem solving. So you have to partner. So all that data sets, those data sets are fantastic, but if you don't get intelligence that's actionable out of them, they're useless. And so in order to do that, the FAA is acquiring new tools that have been used in, for example, in the intelligence industry, to be able to glean insights from proprietary data sets in a way that doesn't expose a source, but does give us something that we can act on. And I think that's a path forward, the protections and then the tools. Those are two pieces that have to be present.
Maybe I can come back to you, Kim, on the great work that you all are doing on AI and the future of what that means for our industry. George, you were there in the early days of CAST and SIS and all the processes that were put together to enable that. Mm-hmm. So you've seen over the past 20 years what has transpired. So maybe you can talk to us a little bit more about data and importance of data and moving forward.
Yeah, and that's where I can explain saying oddly cooperate with the FAA, because it is a phenomenal experience in that the CAST and now the AST, which Kim will go into a little bit more, the evolution of CAST, has presented this opportunity for all these parties to come together and discuss what type of data is necessary, how it's used. One of the things that we could touch on too is this computerization and this use of AI also helps with the, and I'm going to mispronounce this, anonymization of the data also, and protection of that data. So there are ways that we can scrape huge amount of data and take a look at where things are headed. And in CAST, we have seen over the years a lot of predictive data come up that has been analyzed, and we've been able to make predictions about, hey, we really need to look at this area. And then as we dug deeper into the data, we realized, okay, we have TCAS conflicts, we have different issues with specific aircraft types. And so it's phenomenal, and it is, as a passenger and as somebody in the industry, it's heartwarming to take a look at this system and imagine how much technology, how many people, how many different sectors of the industry have worked together to come up with this system, which does, essentially, it's data sharing, it's predictive, and it's evolved with the use of computers. So, I mean, I think that's what, you know, and I just tell a story. Hassan makes me sound a lot older than I am. And I am old, Hassan. But I remember when, you know, I was attorney for a number of air carriers, some of whom are in this room, and we would tell them, go to the FAA, go to your inspector. And they're like, what? And we're like, no, this is what you want to do. You want to develop that, and this is part of safety culture, but this is how things have evolved with data also, is working with those teams so that you understand how that data is developed, how it's kept confidential, and how it's then utilized for the safety of the entire industry and operators of all sizes.
Thank you. Good perspective. Andrew?
Cape Air is a Part 135 airline, so scheduled commuter, 9 seats and below, has to operate under Part 135. We are in a different point in our data journey because the avionics and the electronic data collection that we have available on our type of aircraft is only just now getting to the point where we can get really significant data off that aircraft. Cape Air's newest fleet of aircraft is the Technium Traveler that's got the G1000, and we're getting tremendous, valuable data off of that G1000, but some of our legacy platforms don't yet have that capability. That's an ongoing initiative for Cape Air. We're very fortunate that we're a relatively large 135, 75,000 flights per year, 98 aircraft in the fleet. We will be able to use that data in meaningful ways. Some of our brethren in 135, it's going to take them longer, or they're going to need different tools to allow them to get this data. It's one thing to have data. It's entirely different to have information that's useful, accurate, and actionable. And so that's really the initiative for the Part 135 space right now, is to start using the data that we can get off the new systems, the new avionics that are available for us, whether it's FOQA or FOQA Lite or similar, and be able to make sure that that data is then benefiting our organization. Happily, we've got some great best practices from some of our industry peers, but it's definitely a different scale for the Part 135 operators right now.
Yeah. And there's some opportunities, I think, there for 135 in the coming years, really.
And it's starting to happen. I mean, we're there. We're already getting good data, but we need to have that part of our reflex and get the 135 world just used to doing that and reacting that way.
To talk to Kim later about getting into SIS and
Yes.
getting into that. So we'll take that offline, but it's a good program. Nabuyo, your perspectives.
Data protection definitely is critical. I mean, we cannot do anything to improve safety if we don't have the data that we collect. And I think the trust that we have built is in some ways amazing, because I wanted to say, when we're talking about the safety culture, industry as a whole, whether the government or airlines or industry, we made tremendous effort to shift the culture, and we intentionally made decision to shift the culture. And data protection is another thing, whether your government or airline, entire aviation community in US, we make tremendous effort to protect our safety data, because without it, we cannot do anything. And the data, the SMS provide us the data we collect through SMS and SMS data that we industry learned. SMS help us to look at the system holistically. So also helps us not to react to one thing. And we learned the lesson, the reacting something, one issue, and try to just mitigate one issue actually we may be introducing something new or something bigger. So we airlines have sophisticated SMS, and we collect data through trust of our employees, and those data are incredibly important for us. And then another thing I would like to add is, I think we do have the trust among us. If we look at the history, InfoShare, that it started out with only 30 or so people of FOCA analysts got together initially, and this is a huge event now that attended by 1,500 people from all sectors of aviation and all around the world. And we were able to keep this sacred place as a sacred. We haven't had a leaks. We contain the information. So I think that's a tremendous, significant milestone that we have achieved.
Nobuyo, you mentioned SMS. Maybe we can talk about that a little bit. This has been an important part of this industry for the past 20 years, and especially when the SMS rule came out for Part 121 and airlines implemented that. It's been very successful, and it's an important tool, an important system that we have to continue to preserve safety and improve safety. Now, the foundation, if you may recall, I reported on this last year, we did a survey of the regional airline community. And we looked at the maturity of the SMS. We reported out, and what we found is that significant improvement, significant maturity, and very robust system. So congratulations to the regional community for really stepping up and really improving that. That is so important. And data sharing, information sharing is an important element of that. So, but now what we have is SMS rule that's coming out for the other communities, especially Part 135 now. So Andrew, maybe you can talk to us a little bit about your thoughts on that moving forward.
Sure. Cape Air up until 2018 actually also had a Part 121 program as well. So we were well into SMS in the teens years. When we sunset the 121, we were delighted to be able to bring the best practices from our SMS program into the 135. In fact, we were actually kind of doing it already. And I can proudly say to this day that based on the terrific folks we've got in our safety department, SMS is inculcated throughout where we are in the 135. So we actually had one of the first voluntary SMS programs in 135. And so the new mandate is actually kind of old business for us. We're not particularly concerned about that because we've really been doing that already. And I think the real interest and the rub is going to be how do some of the smaller 135s that have maybe unique business models because they're solving specific transportation problems as we do in the regional space, how do they adapt SMS into their organizations and really do it in a way where they mean it, where it's really helpful to what they do, and it's part of every process that they run through their company.
Now, you raised a good point about smaller operations, smaller safety departments or departments in general. I think moving forward, that's going to be important for the leaders that are taking initiative, putting good, robust systems in place. How could they share their lessons learned and best practices with the rest of the community who are looking for resources, for ways in which they can also move forward with SMS. So anything that you all are doing that you could share, I think is going to be very useful. Any thoughts on that, Andrew?
For me?
Yeah.
So our safety department is led by a gentleman named Nick Kleppel, who's been with the company for, I think, over 10 years now. And he's just an absolutely terrific leader in this space. We generally work with peers at the RAA level, which is mostly 121, but there are some smaller groups where we're starting to talk with the 135s. you can imagine that we get some phone calls from time to time with them saying, hey, what is this going to mean for us and how do we move forward? When it comes to safety, as someone said it in the panel yesterday, we don't compete on safety. We all have to work together on safety. So Cape Air is happy to help out our peers as we move forward. It's just the right thing to do, and it helps the whole industry be safer.
Thank you, Andrew. Did you want to jump in?
I just wanted to add that I think it's really critical to make sure that your SMS is tailored and proportionate to your operation. And so Cape Air has a big fleet, and they might need more complicated systems and tools and policies than you do if you're an SMS, if you're a new 135 operator. So I just think it's really critical. And of course, regional airlines, the larger you are, the more complex your operations, the more intelligence you're going to need, and the more connections you're going to need between, as hazards emerge, are you sharing them with all the people who potentially could encounter this hazard? So it might be more complex depending on the size of your operation. But what matters is, are you collecting information, are you finding problems, and are you fixing them over and over and over and over again? And if you can do those three things, you're doing it right.
George, jump in.
Yeah, I was going to say, and I think Andrew made a good point. I know something about Andrew's background from our discussions, and I think a lot of the people, when we talk about safety culture and instituting SMS in organizations of different sizes, as we all know, aviation is this really, in the grand scheme of things, this small community. And I mean, there's hundreds of thousands of us working in it, but there's a lot of cross-pollination with people who have had experience at 121 carriers, moving into 135 carriers, and 135 people moving up. So there's a lot of back and forth where that helps to develop that safety culture, because, you know, the term cultural appropriation, it's like, it was safety cultural
You can actually
appropriation.
appropriate safety
Yeah.
culture.
It's a virtue
You
here,
can.
yeah.
We like that.
And I think this is where there is a lot of, you know, I like to say cross-pollination, but it is appropriation of a safety culture among these different organizations, because there is a lot of flow among people between operators and maintenance providers. And so anyway, I think that is a key component of building that safety culture, is you have people in your organizations who've been exposed to SMS at different sizes and in different applications. And they can be a key component of building that safety culture.
So we've been talking about SMS, and we've been talking about SIS and CAST, and there's a link between these entities. And SMS, what we have now is a system in which is providing real-time data into the system on a 24-hour basis. You know, we're getting risks identified, risks mitigated by different entities. That's fantastic information. We've had a SIS in which we've got a repository of information across all of the airlines. And I know, Kim, over the past year, you've been leading an effort to take a look at this. How can we transform this process to link these programs together? So if you could talk about that a little bit for the audience.
Yeah,
Very
it's,
important.
thank you so much. I mean, and you've been a huge part of this effort, and as has the National Air Carrier Association, so and Regional Aviation. So we are, we found out that SMSs are evolving faster than the work that we could do together collaboratively at CAST. For example, you guys could find problems and fix them before we could collectively come to safety enhancements. And so we needed to expedite the speed at which we identify issues. And we also needed to provide some sort of a space for a national safety issue registry, where if you find a hazard in your operation that you need to share broadly across the system, you could do that, and people could have access to that so that they could treat that hazard in their safety management system while we look collaboratively across the system. So CAST and SIS have reduced the fatal accident rate by 90%, which is fantastic. And that is something to be really proud of. And the culture continues to evolve, and the pace at which people expect results continues to evolve, and the expectations of the public continue to evolve, so that everyone wants to have information faster better, more comprehensive. Plus, we need context to understand what are the human factors contributing to some of these problems that we're seeing in our FOQA data. And so is there a way to gather more intelligence, more data sets to inform our decision making, to more rapidly identify and mitigate risks? And I think linking up safety management systems across the industry is really a valuable place for us to focus on, because what are you seeing in your collect, find, fix system? You know, what did you fix and how did you fix it? Was it effective? When we have that environment where we could share that data in real time, I mean, with cloud computing, we can share data really rapidly and protect it and learn from each other. So I think we've been on this journey for the last year to speed up our processes, which had served us perfectly for 20 years. But times have changed and evolved, and expectations evolved with them. So now we're using every single tool at our disposal to meet the demand of the public to enhance safety.
So Kim, I think maybe you can also talk a little bit about how you're actually connecting the different communities.
Oh, yeah.
Much better, because I think
that's a big part of it.
That was like really I think a fantastic effort. So
we, instead of having the commercial aviation safety team and the general aviation joint safety committee and that US helicopter safety team, we realized that we were encountering hazards in one area that were similarly felt in new areas. And we also knew that there would be the advancing of advanced air mobility and drones and new operations. And so we've created an aviation safety team that is a systemic, holistic look at all the operations across the aviation system. And it allows the mitigations to be worked by the commercial operators, because they have different mitigation tools, right? Or the GA operators, or the helicopter operators, but we keep all the information shared at the highest levels throughout the system so that we're not operating in silos. And we're not operating across purposes from each other, because it's one airspace at the end of the day.
well, good, thank you. And George, did you want to jump on that one, given that your history on CAST and transformation?
Well, I'm still a skeptic. It's hard. No, I'm not a skeptic.
It's hard to improve perfection.
It's hard to improve perfection. And as Kim said, when you've reduced fatal accidents by 90%, when they were statistically never happening anyway, really, at the end of the day, it's such an incredible feat that when you play with that system and when you change it, the expectations are really high. And so it's a noble effort. And I when I say skeptic, it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out, because it is going to develop safety more. We are going to continue, but we're at the point where mathematically or statistically, it's going to be hard to quantify safety, because we are so safe right now.
Yep.
And so it's, the idea of bringing everybody together, though, I think everyone applauds. And I will say this, CAST and its successors have become a model for around the world. And other modes of transportation, other industries are looking at how can we share data in a similar manner. So it's a really, really noble effort with an amazing track record.
Yes.
And you all are, in a standing ovation for everything the FAA
We are
has done
just
on
trying
this.
to make it even better, and that's hard.
Yeah.
And George, it's important to have skepticism also, as
helps.
with any of these things. I think it's good to ask the right questions and making sure that we're making the right decisions, doing the right things. Nabuya, you've been involved in this.
Yes,
as
I
well,
would love
so-
to add to this conversation, because along with other associations and airlines and other stakeholders, RAA and our airlines have been actively involved in this transition process. And I think the part SMS rule expansion to other parts is also timely as well. The regionals operate at small airports, and we may be the only Part 121 carriers, and the rest of the operation at small airport, maybe general aviation or business aviation. So, and another thing is we just published annual report, 2024 annual report, and according to the statistics, in the report is 63% of U.S. airports that has scheduled passenger service receive their air service only by regional airlines. and we operate about 31% of passenger scheduled departures. So we have big presence in the national airspace. And so how quickly we can share the maybe safety risks that we see in the NAS to other stakeholders or operators in the NAS is I think it's important. We'll be playing a lot more big roles. And then ASD certainly provide that platform.
Thank you. Nabuya, you mentioned InfoShare, and that's coming up. So I was going to ask him maybe if she could kind of talk about that. I mean, that as you mentioned, it started with 30 people getting together, and now, now you can't even fit all these people into one room. I mean, it's like more than 1,000 professionals getting together and sharing information and telling stories about their journey, and that is so important to share. Now, it's also what we're seeing is a generational aspect to this, where we're seeing the early careers as part of this InfoShare, and it's really amazing to see that as well. So, Kim, what's happening?
Yeah, I think you've said some really important things about what the value of InfoShare and what it brings. And it brings that space to model this safety culture, behaviors, safety leadership to the next generation. And that is so critical because it is a countercultural idea if you think about it. The rest of the world doesn't say thank you when you bring bad news or tell me more when you share something that went wrong. And so I think having this once a year, it's coming up, it's going to be in Kansas City in November, and it gives so many people a chance to touch and feel what it's like to be a part of a safety culture, a learning culture, a reporting culture, a just culture, a flexible culture, and an informed culture. I mean, those are the elements that we see demonstrated in real life over and over again throughout the week of InfoShare. So that's, I think, incredibly valuable, and sometimes that has to happen in person, and it's really felt, and then it sticks, right? And you go home and you remember, oh, this is really helpful when I behave in this way, and I'll get more insights into what's happening in my operations. And I think that's one of the biggest values of the aviation safety InfoShare, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on what you all...
Very frank and open discussions, like
Oh, yeah.
shockingly so sometimes. And you're saying, this is great, though. This is how we have to share information.
And what we're seeing, I think, in this is actually we have a lot of international participation at this event because it's really a model. This is the largest gathering of safety professionals, in one place from across industry that come together and invest that time. And what's important is that the organizations, airlines, all the entities are actually supporting this. This is a huge investment, spending 3 days, in this event. And so this really is leadership. And it's leadership across the board saying, yes, we will invest, we will come together, we will focus, and we'll do a stand down, if you will, and share what is going on. And so I think it's going to be important for industry, the FAA, continue to support these kinds of initiatives moving forward. Andrew, anything from your perspective with respect to, we talked about the new generation, and you're, looking at that in terms of the future. What are your perspectives about imparting these kinds of things on the new generation?
Sure. So Cape Air has a critical workforce development program, particularly on the flight side with our partners at Republic. The folks that come through the Republic Lift program are professional pilot students. This is what their real goal in life is to be. And they're getting that professionalism from day one at Lift. And so we've actually seen very good adoption of our SMS program and our internal reporting right from day one, with most of our new pilots coming from Lift and this professional pilot program. It really gets back to what the industry is working on with ensuring that we are not just focused on necessarily hours, but the type of training that people get. That training environment in and of itself helps with the professionalism of the industry. And when we can put that stamp on those future aviators from day one of their experience, that just becomes their expectation. So we're doing that sort of clay molding, modeling at the very beginning here, and it's working quite well. They then matriculate onto the regional carrier that we're affiliated with, and they're great employees then for that regional airline.
Yeah, I was very fortunate to visit Lyft and just see all the new generation. They're going through the training. You mentioned training. We had a training session yesterday, and that's so important in moving forward to look at new ways in which we can teach the next generation not only safety culture but new ways of training, especially with the new generation. They're learning differently. They have different approaches to learning capabilities. So I think that's going to be important. George, did you want to jump on, the next generation learning and within your community? What are some of the things you're seeing?
No, the same thing. I mean, our carriers and a number of our ULCC and cargo carriers are doing the same thing. I think that development of, I want to say youth because they're all younger than me, but I mean, it's that development of a young workforce and a diverse workforce is really, really critical to, again, safety culture. I mean, I think this is what we're seeing is, we have a number of training programs. We have a number of, in both AMP and pilot training is getting younger people involved. And truthfully, they're much more comfortable with a lot of this data sharing and technology than some of us old guys. I mean, I think they are more comfortable living in that environment where you're sharing this, where you're using technology, and where you're having technology assist you in your task. So I think this is all it's a positive development. It's absolutely necessary, as we know from the pilot shortage, from the AMP shortage. We have to reach out and develop leaders and the workforce pool going forward. It's going to be critical, and they are going to be the critical factors in aviation safety as it develops.
Kim, within your organization, you're also going through bringing some new talent on board, which has been fantastic to see. Any thoughts?
Just that we owe it to the next generation to pass on some of the experiences that we underwent. So when I was growing up, planes crashed. They did. I would see it in the news, and you would get scared, and people would worry about getting on a plane, and you might say a little prayer when you're taking off. But they don't crash anymore, which is fantastic. What I want to make sure we don't lose is that they don't crash because of the work of a lot of people. It's not an accident that we are really focused and I think passing on that knowledge is critical. Otherwise, what you're going to see is people who don't have understanding of the value of the things that we do together. And then for me, I'm Gen X, so we know everything. No. The hardest thing is to create space for all the generations in the workplace and to interact with them in a way that allows them to contribute and speak up so that you're not dominating conversations and you're not, steamrolling. Just listen to me, I'll tell you everything and you'll be perfect. Because as soon as you walk out the door or retire, they'll forget everything you said. People forget what you say. They remember how you make them feel. And I think if we make them realize the importance and the weight and the gravitas of the work that we do in aviation safety, they'll adopt that and carry it forward.
Thank you. Our time is short, so we'll try to maybe wrap up a little bit with some thoughts. I think we've talked about a number of important things: SMS, information sharing, collaboration. We're at the heart of everything that we're doing, collaboration. So maybe what we can do is just give some thoughts in terms of what we can do moving forward more as we look at the new rules that are coming on shortly, and what we can do to build on what this industry has done for the past 10, 15 years. George, let's start with you.
Yeah, very quickly, I think one of the key things we have to look at is, are there legislative or regulatory changes necessary to protect this data? Because the collaboration, the whole system is dependent upon the ability to freely exchange it, take action on it, all of SMS. And I think one of the things we have to look at is, are there better ways to protect that data going forward from disclosure? Because disclosure and misuse of that data could blow the whole thing up. And we don't want to see that. We could go backwards 15 years by the misuse of the information that's there.
No, that is important, and I think that that is something that we will need to continue to work with the FAA and with industry, coming up with new governance structures, new ways in which we can make sure to have those mechanisms in place so that we have reporters that are reporting on data provide that information freely. And that is so paramount. Kim, your thoughts?
I'm going to reiterate, I think something that I've said a few times is that you set the tone if you're a CEO, if you're the head of your organization, you set the culture. Everyone looks to you to see how to behave. Do you have humble curiosity when you get new information? And by doing so, you will actually allow for an evolution of thought, and you'll be able to meet the challenges of the future. And I know that sounds funny coming from the government to say humble curiosity, but I really do think that we can't manage in the 21st century with so many things changing so rapidly without that mindset of continuous learning and some humility that we don't know everything. I would just ask you all to think about how you can create that mindset in your own organization so that we can continue to evolve.
Kim, you mentioned leadership, and that is so important as part of culture and safety culture, and is being discussed across the board. Andrew, as a COO, in your role, what are your thoughts on that?
Sure.
Leadership and importance.
One of the things we've kind of tiptoed around today is that because of the industry's record right now, what we really need to fight against is complacency. We absolutely need to keep leaning forward on all of these new systems that make it better and that use the new tools, whether it's AI on the data or in 135, the data we can now pull off the aircraft. That is super, super important. But we need to do that in a way that works for our people. Admiral Bill McRaven, in his recently retired US Navy Admiral, in his book, Wisdom of the Bullfrog, has a wonderful line. And it's that you cannot surge trust. So as we work with our people to get them to do this reporting, to give us the data that we need, it is so important that we never violate that trust so that they're always with us as we're constantly working on safety.
Thank you, Andrew. And there's a reason why this is called a leaders conference. And we've been talking about leadership throughout the past couple of days, and that is so paramount. Nabuyu, any thoughts from you?
So yesterday, during the opening session, President and CEO Famila Kiplak said, SMS is a cornerstone of aviation, and it is. And I would like to add that SMS have to evolve. And also I'd like to emphasize that we must focus on people and invest in people, like everyone else said. Just like our life is journey, safety is a journey and not a destination. And I would like to add last word. I am so honored to represent a great group of safety leaders of regional airlines.
Great. Well, thank you. This has been a great conversation. Hopefully, this has been useful and informative for you all. Let's thank our panel for a great discussion.
Thank you, Hassan.
Thank you so much for that panel. It really is inspiring, and it's fitting here at the Leaders Conference that the leaders set the tone. And I know I leave that panel feeling inspired to keep doing everything that we can to stay ahead of the risk as our environment changes.